Welcome back to the channel. It's LukeTheDuke, and we just got a ton of new Starfield lore dropped on us out of the blue via the official Bethesda website. Now, I uploaded my video this morning and logged into IRL work, and so all of this completely blindsided me. And what we've got here is a text form timeline taking us from the time mankind is leaving Earth all the way up to the beginning of Starfield, which is roughly 280 years. And oh, by the way, there are two armed conflicts we need to discuss. I'm going to break all of this down for you and throw in some thoughts along the way. Thank you again for all the support you've been showing my Starfield uploads. In case you haven't done so already, please hit subscribe and ring the notifications bell to receive my latest upload alerts. Likes, comments, shares are always greatly appreciated. I've included chapters so you can jump around as needed, and let's get this one up and running. Now, this all comes to us in a timeline text format, so I'm going to do my best to break it all down as efficiently as possible for you and interject my thoughts from time to time. And just in case, if you are interested, there is a link to the Bethesda site down in the video description so you can view all of this for yourselves. Okay, so to kick this all off, this new timeline begins in the year 2050. That's just 27 years into the future from our current real-world timeline. I know that's strange to think about, and just in case it happens to overlap, this is just 37 years before the events of Fallout 4. Now, according to this new timeline, this is the year humans first arrived on Mars, and 50 years later, by 2100, humans are now living in space. Now, we've seen bits and pieces of our existence on Mars through the brief glimpses at the city of Cydonia, a harsh environment that serves as the largest mining facility for the United Colonies. We've seen just how brutal this existence is through the Starfield Direct presentation, where periods between fatal accidents are measured in hours. By 2156, humans have arrived in the Alpha Centauri system, which is 4.37 light years away from Earth. So this is 106 years into the future since mankind first arrived on Mars. And what I'm not seeing here is any mention of the grav drive system. Was it in place? Was it not in place? I can't tell. The timeline does not say that humans took those 106 years to travel the distance between Sol and the Alpha Centauri systems, but looking at the star map, there's a natural line of progression from Sol to Narion and eventually to Alpha Centauri. Just 3 years later, in 2159, the United Colonies are now established. And from what we've learned from the Starfield Direct, the inhabitants of the UC consider themselves the true children of Earth, valuing law, discipline, and the legacy of humanity. 2160, so just 1 year later, and New Atlantis is founded and becomes the official capital city of the United Colonies in 2161. New Atlantis was also the first major human settlement in space. 7 years later, so it's 2167, and Solomon Co. settles in the Cheyenne system and founds its first settlement, Aquila City. Now here's another shot of the star map, so you can see Sol, Narion, and downwards to Alpha Centauri, and then way up in the upper right of this pic is Cheyenne. 21 more years pass by, so now it's 2188, and Solomon Co. invites Voli to join Cheyenne in a new alliance known as the Freestar Collective, which it does, officially bringing the Freestar Collective into existence just 1 year later in 2189. No mention is made of when Voli was settled, but from the star map, you get a sense of just how far away and isolated Voli is from the rest of the settled systems. 2194, and here is where the interstellar conflict begins to brew. You see, the United Colonies position the Star Station Clinic in orbit around Deepala in the Narion system. The unaffiliated people of the Narion system see this as the United Colonies attempt to expand their borders and demand the UC remove the Star Station Clinic. Of course, the UC refuse, and so the people of Narion vote to join the Freestar Collective, who mobilize to protect the system in the year 2195. Let's bring back that star map again, and you can start to see the territorial issues at play here. Sol, our system, is controlled by the UC. Narion, which falls in between Sol and Alpha Centauri, and who was previously independent, votes to join the Freestar Collective. And so now you've got systems in the way of systems, and of course, the United Colonies can't have this. It's now the year 2196, and the United Colonies mobilizes a fleet into the Narion system, and the Freestar Collective responds by doing the same. And so here begins the first major conflict between the UC and the Freestar Collective, called the Narion War. And remember, there's still another conflict to come. 20 bloody years pass by. It's now the year 2216, so this first conflict, the Narion War, lasts for 20 years, which I find very interesting. And as the war drags on, the public becomes tired of it, and so the Treaty of Narion is signed by the UC and Freestar Collective, and that same year, 2216. Now, this is the first time we see this term settled systems, which is formalized within this treaty, and that comes into play in just a bit. It's now the year 2221, and the Freestar Rangers are founded as an elite protective and investigative force dedicated to serving all citizens of the Freestar Collective. And we've seen these guys in action in the Starfield Direct, as they look like Western sheriffs wearing badges and wielding pistols. Here's another milestone in this timeline. It's now the year 2275, so it's 54 years after the Rangers are formed, and here is where Constellation comes to be, formed by Sebastian Banks. Other original members include Chloe Bao, Aja Mamasa, Darius Andres, Bernadette Laurent, Everardo Gilles, and Kadri Toma. This is also the time that Constellation HQ, known as the Lodge, is built in New Atlantis to serve the future needs of Constellation. 2305, and Barrett joins Constellation, and we've seen him featured in the Starfield Direct presentation. 2307, so just 2 years later, and we've reached another interesting milestone in this timeline, as it's not expressly mentioned, but the settled systems term comes into play. You see, the Freestar Collective have begun farming on the planet Vesta in the Lunara system, and by 2308, the United Colonies claim that by the Freestar Collective establishing a colony in a fourth star system, the Freestar Collective have violated the Treaty of Narion. I guess this was a piece of lore we are missing concerning what exactly these settled systems terms are labeled as. Anyways, diplomatic talks break down, and the United Colonies burns Vesta to the ground, killing anyone who stays behind or was brought in to defend it. So this was an outright massacre, and hence the colony wars have now begun. 3 years later, in the year 2310, and Constellation comes into possession of their first artifact and places it into the Constellation archives. 2311, after several years of conflict, and the colony wars have effectively come to an end at the Battle of Cheyenne, as a combined force of civilian and military Freestar Collective ships takes down the major ships of the United Colonies Navy using hit-and-run tactics. Does any of this give you Star Wars Rebellion versus Imperial Forces space battle vibes? Because I'm feeling them right now. 4 years later, it's 2315, and the Vanguard is officially formed in response to the Freestar Collective using civilian ships during the colony wars. Now, the Vanguard is the United Colonies' own civilian navy, relying on civilians using their own ships who have pledged to protect the UC, ultimately earning citizenship in the UC for their service. And we saw this featured in the Supra et Ultra Settled Systems animated short. 4 years later, so it's the year 2319, and we find Sarah Morgan, who was a part of the UC Navigator Corps, is now let go out of that organization, and so joins Constellation. 2321, and Constellation gains its financier, Walter Stroud, co-owner of Stroud Eklund, one of the Settled Systems' premier starship manufacturers. 1 year later, 2322, and an interesting addition for Constellation as former Crimson Fleet pirate Vladimir Saul joins their ranks. 2325, so just 5 years before the start of Starfield, and Sarah Morgan has now become acting chair of Constellation. And she certainly sounds very talented and ambitious, as it only took her 6 years to achieve that rank. Also in this same year, Matteo Cotri, the theologian, joins Constellation. Just 1 year later, so it's the year 2326, and Barrett finds the original artifact hidden in the Constellation archives. Also in the same year, Constellation gains another member when they add on Noel. 2327, Constellation gains 2 new members when Freestar Ranger Samco and his daughter, Cora, join the organization. Another year passes by, it's 2328. Constellation gains its final member as Andrea joins the group. And finally, during this same year, Barrett convinces Constellation to purchase the star station L868 and modify it to become a deep space scanner nicknamed the Eye. One can only presume to be actively searching for more pieces of the artifacts. And finally, we reach the end of the timeline. It's 2330 AD. Starfield begins. So, how about all of this new Starfield lore information? I mean, after reading it all through, I feel like I have even more questions than when I first started. For instance, when were grav drives developed? For what I'm reading, they weren't there the moment we began space exploration. Also, what happened to the original members of Constellation, and what were they trying to do with the artifact? And who knew Samco had a daughter? All I know is that this feels like we're going to start getting a steady barrage of little bits of info, like this one, leading all the way up to the eventual launch of Starfield. Sound off in the comments section below. After hearing all of this, what questions do you have? Remember to hit subscribe and ring the notifications bell to receive my latest upload alerts. Likes, comments, shares are greatly appreciated. All my socials can be found in the video description. Shout out to the now over 135,000 of you that have taken the leap and hit subscribe. And a special thanks goes out to my patrons over on Patreon. I keep seeing these YouTube super chats come flying in, and for anyone sending those things over, you are awesome. Until the next one, this is LtBuzzLitebeer signing off.